In this video, I'm going to go over another advanced feature of Excel related to formulas and functions, which is what I call lookup functions. And to give you some background on this, previously we went through functions that were mostly related to data, formulas, making calculations within Excel. So we looked at things like how you might do a sum product on the categories of product price and product quantity to figure out the total revenue over this period of April 2009 right here. And then we looked at other features relating to circularity, iterations, and how to model different scenarios. So the lookup functions are a bit different from what we've been over before. They're probably closest to the match and offset functions that we looked at previously in Excel. And probably the easiest way to show you exactly what the lookup functions do is to just give you a quick example right now. So the first function I want you to look at here is called VLOOKUP. And VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup. And you see the description right here. Looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. By default, the table must be sorted in ascending order. So basically what VLOOKUP does, and I'll just type in an example here so you can see it exactly. I'm going to enter parentheses and then lookup value. So let's enter Hollies here for our lookup value. Now for the table array, what we want to do with this function is select this whole area. So we're going to select everything that's in here, including, by the way, the row at the top. It doesn't really matter in this case, but it's just good practice because in a lot of other functions in Excel, they require you to have labels at the top telling Excel what each column is. So we're just going to select everything here with the Shift, Control, and arrow keys. I'm going to hit F4 with that so that if we copy this somewhere else, okay, well actually there we don't even need to press F4 because Excel has already labeled this print area. So then for the column index number, so this is basically the column that we're going to be selecting. So let's just enter 1 for this for right now. And then for range lookup, we don't really need this in this case. Range lookup would be if we had a huge, much larger area, if we had thousands or tens of thousands of rows, and we couldn't get to the exact number, we just wanted to get some kind of approximation. It would be more useful with numerical data rather than the type of data that we have here that's for customer data. So we're just going to leave that blank for now, and I'll just end the formula right here. Okay, so we've entered 1, and you might be a little confused at what this function is doing exactly. So we're basically looking for a row in this area, Hollies. So we're looking for a row that matches this Hollies criteria that we entered right here. And we're looking within this print area, and then we're returning the first column. Well, in this case, the first column is just right here, customer name. But let's try changing this to column 2 now. Now we get fashion, the industry. And then if we change it to 3, we get the number of employees. If we change it to 4, we get the product price. In this case, the 25,000 for Hollies, and so on. So this is how you use VLOOKUP. And this is probably one of the most common functions that you're going to use in Excel. It's useful for data sets like this, but it actually pops up all the time. And one quick example is that, let's say you were looking at comparable companies. So we'll just move to the valuation template here. So you see that the way we've laid out comparable companies right here, we've actually listed the company name, and then we've actually done all the calculations within this one worksheet. Now, this is actually somewhat unusual, and you hardly ever actually do this when you're working in investment banking. Typically what you do is you do all the calculations here. So you might calculate the enterprise value, the revenue, EBITDA, EPS, make adjustments and everything else on a separate page. And then what you do is you link in everything. So instead of having all the calculations here for enterprise value, for example, you would say something like VLOOKUP. You would give the company's name or the ticker, the symbol of the company on the stock market. So you'd have that for the lookup value, and then for the table array, you would go to the sheet that actually has those calculations, and then for the column index number, typically you'd put the index number that you want to get right above the column right here. And that's how you would actually bring in all these calculations and display it on one page. So that's a really common example of where you use VLOOKUP, but it actually pops up in a lot of other scenarios as well. So it's a very useful function, and we're going to go through an example here to see just how useful it might be with our data set. Now another related function, I'm just going to delete the VLOOKUP here for right now. Another related function is HLOOKUP. Now, HLOOKUP is basically the opposite of VLOOKUP. So it stands for horizontal lookup. And we see the description right here. Looks for a value in the top row of a table or array of values, and then returns a value in the same column from a row you specify. Now, whether you use HLOOKUP or VLOOKUP really depends on how you have your data laid out. For the most part, it's more common to have data laid out like this, to have all these customer names over here on the side, and then to have your actual data going across like this, in which case you'd always be using VLOOKUP. But if this were the reverse, if for some reason we had all the customer names on the top in this top row right here, and then we had the actual data going this way, then we'd be using HLOOKUP. Okay, and to show you a quick example of how the HLOOKUP function works, I'm going to enter it right here. And for the lookup value, let's just say number of employees for right now. And that corresponds to the column C right here. Then for table array, we're just going to enter this whole thing again. So we'll go to the top left corner, press Shift Control, and then the down arrow key, then the right arrow key to select the whole area. Then for the row index number, let's just enter 4 for here. We'll leave the range lookup blank. And we see that we're getting the 5,000, which corresponds to this row, the row 4 right here. Now if we were to change this to 5, for example, we get 700. We change it to 7, we get 2,000, and so on as we move down right here. So that's basically how HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP work. Now, unlike some other functions in Excel, you don't need to have all your data on one page to do this properly. So it's fine to actually have your data spread across multiple tabs. So we could make another tab right here next to customer data and be pulling in all our data from there, and that would be fine for HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. So another function related to lookups in Excel is what's called match. And let me just show you a quick example of how this works. So let's enter match right here. And then for lookup value, let's just enter Victoria's. Now for lookup array, all this means is the region where we actually want to find the data. So let's just go to the top right here with the control and arrow keys, and then shift control down to select this whole column. And then for match type, we're going to enter 0 because we want an exact match. Close the parentheses, and now we see that this returns 17, which corresponds to row 17 here. So Excel has told us that in this particular area, the first time we come across Victoria's is in row 17. And you can also use this for rows and columns. You can use this for rows and columns. It doesn't matter. You can use it for entire areas like we have here. So if you wanted to, you could just select this whole area, and you could tell it to find 1 million or whatever number you want. You could tell it to find a date and it would return that. Now match is not all that common in investment banking and private equity. There are some cases where it's very useful and you do use it, but for the most part when we're doing match, we can usually use lookup, the HLOOKUP or the VLOOKUP functions, and sometimes even the offset or choose functions, which we went through before in place of match. So you don't see it all that frequently. I would say the HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP functions are far more common. So match basically returns the position of a certain item in a set of data that you have, and that's what you use it for. Now, another function related to lookups is index. So this is almost the same, except this returns a value or reference of the cell at the intersection of a particular row and column in a given range. So let's just look at an example of how that works, because that description makes it seem a little bit complicated. So we'll enter index right here. And for our array, this is just the area again. So we can just enter this entire area, the print area right here. For the row number, let's just say 5 for now. And then for the column number, let's say 7. And this gives us planning. And that corresponds to row 5 here for Cindy's. And we see that it is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th column over for product category. So you can see here that with index, you can basically replicate VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. It's just that this time you need to specify both the column and the row. So you could use index in place of HLOOKUP or VLOOKUP in your functions in Excel, but Typically, when we're going through this exercise and we're pulling the data, we prefer to use VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP because most of the time we know what our row is and we just need to find the column, or we know what our column is and we just need to find the row. So in that case, HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP are a bit simpler to use because you only have to specify one thing. But nevertheless, index is another function related to looking up data in Excel that can prove very useful depending on our model and depending on the layout for our data that we have. Okay, so here's the exercise. So if you look at this data, you might have noticed that some of it is repetitive. In other words, we have duplicate entries here and we don't really need them. One example is over here on the address, city, state, zip code, and phone number columns. So if you think about it, for a given customer, these are not going to change at all. So for Buster's, for example, the address is always going to be 33 Montgomery Street, San Francisco. For some of these others, the same applies. You're always going to have the same address for the same customers. So why should we bother displaying it here twice? It seems like it might be better to maybe separate this into a separate customer tab and put everything there instead. And the same applies for industry and number of employees. A given company is going to always be in the same industry. It's always going to have the same number of employees. So why should we bother writing everything here twice when we could just consolidate it into separate data and then pull it in right here? So here's what we're going to do to fix this problem. So first off, we're going to enter a new worksheet right here. And I'll just move this to the right. And we can name this worksheet customers because that's what it's going to be. Customers. Now what we want to do in this worksheet is replicate what we have here, sort of, but not copy the entire thing. We want to copy the repetitive, the redundant data right here. So the industry, employees, the address, city, state, zip code, phone number. Now the rest of this, the product price, product quantity, product revenue, category, order date, these all depend on the individual row, and so these are not repeated at all. These are all different depending on which row we're in. So we're not going to copy those. VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP help most when you have a situation like this where some of the data is repeated and then some of it is not repeated, and that's what we use it for a lot in Excel. First, I will select these first three columns right here, copy these, then I'll go over to the Customers tab and I will just paste these in right here. Then I'll go back to the customer data, and this time I'm going to go over to the address columns right over here, copy these, and now I'll paste them in right here. So the alignment here is a little messed up, so let's just fix that right now. Okay. So this is more helpful now. We still have a lot of duplicate data, and what we want to do on this sheet now is to actually get rid of all these duplicate columns, because you see that these three are exactly the same. Buster's, the industry, number of employees, and address never changed for this particular customer. And what we're trying to do is consolidate the data and normalize the data here. So let's fix this now. We're going to select this whole area, and hopefully you remember how we uniqueify a list. But in case you don't, what we want to do is go to the advanced filter. So I'll go to that right now. And we see we have a couple different options here. Filter the list, copy to another location, unique records only. So what we want to do is make sure that our list range here is set to A1 to H22, which it is right now. And we want to actually copy this to another location so that this works properly. Because remember, if we just filter this in place, the issue is that the duplicate rows still stay there, except Excel hides them. We don't want that to happen. We want the duplicate rows to actually be deleted here. So for the copy to part, let's just select an area that's about the same range. For the number of rows here, it actually doesn't matter all that much because a lot of these are going to be deleted anyway, but let's just try to keep it the same, going from 1 to 22. So in this case, it would be going from 24 to 46. And then make sure that unique records only is selected. Okay. So now you see what we've done. we've basically eliminated all these duplicates right up here. And now we're left with only the unique customer data down here. And that's exactly what we want. So now let's just get rid of this up at the top right here. Delete everything. And now just to fix the formatting, let's just add a border here at the bottom. Okay. So now this is our consolidated customer data. This is the information that for each customer doesn't change at all. So now that we have that, let's go back to our customer data tab and see how we can use this with the lookup functions that I just went over. So first things first, I'm going to actually delete all this data over here for the address. And the reason is that in this particular case, for this customer data, it's not too helpful for us to really look at the address for each of the customers. If we wanted to add this back in, or if we wanted to show this, we could do it easily with the lookup functions. But in this case, we're really trying to figure out the average revenue per month or the average revenue per customer or other items of that nature. So in this case, we're actually going to delete this. And if we ever want to include it back again, we could just go over to our customers tab right here and pull it in from here. So let's just delete this whole thing. And we can fix the formatting here with adding a border to the right side. Okay, so now we have this industry and the number of employees right here. And these are actually helpful to have in this context because it lets us easily look at the product order, product price, and that kind of data and see if there's any kind of correlation between the industry and the number of employees here. So to fix this, we're going to use the lookup functions right here. And specifically, we're going to be using VLOOKUP here. So here's how we do it. So I'll enter VLOOKUP first. For the lookup value, I'm just going to enter busters right here because that's what we're looking for in our customers data. And for this busters lookup value, I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to anchor this, except I don't want it to stay at just $A, $2. What I actually want to do is anchor it twice so that it changes to $A and then 2. The reason is that when we copy this formula around, we want the row to change, but we want the column to stay the same. So we always want it to be pulling from this customer name column over here, but we want to also make sure that when we're copying it around, it doesn't shift over into industry. It always stays in the customer name category right there. So we have that. Now for the table array, we're going to just select this whole area. And actually, I probably should have named this. I should have given this a name in Excel, but this is not critical, so we can just skip that for now. And we're going to anchor this whole area as well to make sure that it stays the same when we're copying it around. Now, for the column index number, there are a couple of different ways I could do this. But the simplest thing that we could do here is to just look in our customers data right here and see that industry is column number 2. So I'm just going to enter 2 for the column index number. Then for the range lookup, I'm just going to leave that blank for now. Okay, so now VLOOKUP is in place, and I'm just going to copy the formula down. Okay, so now we see that we've replicated all this by using the VLOOKUP function rather than hard coding everything right here. So rather than writing everything out and listing it all here, we're now using VLOOKUP, and the customer data, the industry, is all consolidated in one place on this page. And that's really the smart way to do this type of data analysis and manipulation in Excel. You don't want to have to go through and change everything. You just want to change it in one place and then have it be reflected here. So if we were to change busters, for example, to gambling, let's say, then this would also change right here. And that's just a smart time-saving method and one of the best ways you can be using VLOOKUP in Excel. So I'll change it back to entertainment now. Now we're going to do the same thing for number of employees. So let's just copy this formula over. Except we want to actually be selecting column number 3 right here, because that's what employees is. We have 1, 2, 3 columns. So we're going to be selecting column 3 for that one. And again, we see that this A2 is stayed correct because we anchored it the right way to begin with. Let's just copy that formula down. Okay, so now we've basically replicating what we had before, except it's set up in a much smarter way now, so that whenever we have duplicate data like this that's the same for each of the different customers that appears the same on multiple rows, we're now using the VLOOKUP function to get it, and it's all consolidated in one place so that if we change the number of employees or the industry right here, it's immediately reflected. So that's what we have in terms of lookup functions in Excel. And what I want you to do now is to pause the video and try doing this yourself. I know it's complicated. There are a lot of steps involved in this process. So if you get stuck or if you just want to check your work, then unpause it, and then I'll walk you through the entire thing starting from the beginning and going through it this time by showing you all the shortcuts. And again, this builds on a lot of what we went through previously with formatting, with copying, moving around rows and columns and everything like that. So there is a fair amount of review here. So in case you've forgotten anything or in case you get stuck, just unpause this video and I'll walk you through it this time in more detail with giving you all the shortcuts as well. Okay, so this is the original worksheet that we started with, and I've just gone back to our original state right here by opening up the old file. In this case, it's just easier to open the old file rather than hitting undo because we changed so many things and add and delete in areas that undo would not work that well here. So to get started, let's just start replicating what I had done previously. And we'll start by entering a new worksheet here. So I'll press Shift F11 to do that. Shift F11 is the shortcut key to enter a new worksheet. To move it, we could actually just use the mouse right here. It doesn't really matter because we're only doing this once. So we'll just move this worksheet over here. Now to name it, I will press Alt-OHR to name it, and we'll call this Customers. Then I'll move back to the Customer Data worksheet with Control Page Up. And now to copy over some of this data, we'll select everything with the Shift Control arrow keys, so Shift Control down and then right arrow twice to select this customer name, industry, number of employees. Control C to copy it. Control Page down to move to customers. And then Control V to paste it. Control Page up to move back. Then we'll move over to the address categories with the arrow keys. Shift Control down and then right to select these four columns. Control C to copy them. Control Page down to move to the customers category, customers worksheet right here. Control V to paste it. And here we have our data. To fix the alignment, we'll press Shift Control down right to select the whole area. And then Alt OCA to auto fit the width of each of these columns. Now to remove the duplicate entries here, we press Shift Control down and then right to select this whole area. And then we press Alt DFA for the advanced filter command. Press Alt O to copy to another location. The list range here is fine. So for copy to, we'll press Alt T to get there. Press the arrow keys to move out onto the worksheet. Then we'll just select about the same area. So I'm holding down the Shift key here with the arrow keys to select this. So press Shift right a few times at first. Now I'm pressing Shift down to select these remaining columns. So A24 through H46 are selected. Then I make sure that Unique Records Only is checked with the Alt-R key right here. And using the Control and the down arrow key, we see that this worked correctly, and now we have all unique customer records right here. So now let's just delete this part at the top. We'll press Control Up to get to the top. Shift Control down arrow key to select this whole area. I'll keep holding down Shift to select this other row here at the bottom. I'll press Alt ED to delete this whole area. Now to fix the border here, I press Control down arrow key and then Shift Control right to get this row selected. Control 1, B to go to border, and then Alt B to highlight the bottom border right here. So that's selected. Now let's move back to our original worksheet with Control Page Up. What we're going to do here is select these 4 columns and delete them. So Control Spacebar, Shift, and then right arrow key 1, 2, 3, 4 times to get all these columns over here, and then Alt E D to delete them. So we have that. And now to fix the border here, we press Shift Control down arrow key in the rightmost column, Control 1, B for border, and then Alt R to fix the right border right here. So the formatting is now fixed. And now to add the lookup functions, in industry, I simply start typing equals VLOOKUP. And then for lookup value, I have busters. Now to anchor this properly, I press F4 once. That would cause the cell to never move when we copy it around, which we don't want. We want it to move down in columns, but not in, we want it to move down in rows, but not in columns. Press F4 again. It's still not quite right. And then F4 again. And that will cause the column to stay the same, but the row to shift. And then for the table array, press Control Page down to move to this sheet. Go to the top left corner, Shift Control down, and then right to select this whole area. F4 to anchor it. We want to anchor the whole area here. And then for the column index number, I will just type 2 because that's what our industry is right here. The industry is the second column. So that VLOOKUP function is completed now. I copy this with Control C, then I press Shift Control down arrow key to select this area right here. Then I press Alt ESF, and we see that everything is working properly. The reason I used Alt ESF to copy the formula rather than the Control D key to copy it down is because the Control D key would mess up the border at the bottom because it would copy the formatting as well. So in this case, it's easier just to copy only formulas because our formatting is already set here. Okay, and now to get our employees column here working correctly, I copy this formula, so Control C, Alt ESF, so that the formatting stays right. So Alt ESF to copy formula. And I'll change the column index number to 3 right here. So the column index number is now 3. I'll press Control C, and then Shift Control down, and Alt ESF to copy that formula down. And now our table is complete. Our redundant data is now separated out into our customers worksheet right here, and everything looks fine, and this is finished. So I know that was a complicated exercise, and it builds on a lot of what we did previously, but I actually set it up this way intentionally so that you would gradually progress through all the lessons, starting out with the navigation and the formatting, going into formulas, and then building on this until we could get to the point where this data set is now looks much better, is now much easier to manipulate, and is better separated out so that all the relevant data is in one place. So it does build on a lot of what we did previously, but if you can replicate this and if you understand how to recreate this in Excel, then you know about 99% of what you need with Excel for investment banking or private equity now. So that's pretty much it for our overview of lookup functions in Excel. And coming up next, I'm going to be going through pivot tables, which are another important feature used for analyzing data in Excel like we are right now. And then I'll go into setting up your own macros and then custom keyboard shortcuts as well. And those are the final, more advanced Excel features that we'll be covering in this course.